Brandi. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. Welcome to NCJAR's Trends in the Real Estate Market. My name is Crystal Colon, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Unfortunately, Jessica Lautz fell ill and is unable to join us. However, we are very fortunate to have Brandi Snowden here, NAR's Director of Member and Consumer Research, stepping in. Brandi brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise and will guide us through the latest research, trends, and insights shaping today's real estate market. As a reminder, feel free to submit your questions into the chat throughout the session, and we'll be happy to answer them during the Q&A. And we're excited to have you here today. So let's get started. And please join me in welcoming Brandi Snowden.
Thank you, Crystal. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let me see. And also tell you all a little bit about myself. So again, I'm the Director of Member and Consumer Survey Research at NAR. I work on many of our survey reports here at NAR, the public-facing ones that you might be familiar with. So one of the main ones I'll be focusing on today is the Profile of Home Buyers and Sellers report. So this looks at all of the different aspects of the home buying process among recent buyers and recent home sellers, looking at all the financial aspects, the types of homes that they're buying. So those are all great trends to take a look at. I'll also be sharing some of the housing statistics data from our data team and some of the projects that they're working on a monthly and quarterly basis. And then also one of our other newer reports that we are releasing on an annual basis, looking at race and ethnicity in the home buying process, and also challenges that they might be facing getting into home ownership. So be covering lots of different types of data today. Yeah, thank you again for inviting me. Happy to be able to join on short notice. So first, I wanted to get into one of our monthly surveys, and this is among our membership. This is our Realtors Confidence Index survey. So we ask our membership on a monthly basis about their recent transactions. And from this, we gather some timely data on different market indicators. So looking at this chart, this is just pulling out some of the things that we're asking in this survey, but we ask about the share of our membership who are working with first-time home buyers. And in this data, we compare to the previous year in the same month. So looking at this first data point, looking at first-time home buyers, we see that this was 32% among our membership in March, which was our latest data. Looking at this sales to investors was 15%, excuse me. Both of these were unchanged from a year prior. We also look at cash sales. So we saw that cash sales accounted for 26% of transactions, so down slightly from a year prior at 28%. We also look at distressed sales, so foreclosures and short sales. They're making up about 3% in this latest report, so up slightly from 2% a year ago. And then we also ask about the days on the market, so the number of days that homes are typically on the market from our members. And they were saying that this was a median of 36 days in March, so up from 33 the year prior. So we have other data points that we're looking at in this report, so I recommend taking a look at that. And this data comes out on a monthly basis and is released with our existing home sales data. So this is also released from our data team. So they're tracking the number of existing home sales each month, and then also looking at the median existing home sales prices. So I just wanted to pull some of the data. Again, this is on a national level, but we also have some regional data available. So looking at existing home sales, we saw that in March, compared to the month prior, that home sales were down 5.9% to 4.02 million. We saw that from a year ago, home sales were down by 2.4%. And then looking at the median existing home sales price, we saw that that was actually up from 1 year prior. So now the median existing home sales price is $403,700, which isn't actually an all-time high. For the month of March, we've seen 21 months of consecutive year-over-year price increases. And then I also wanted to pull some of the regional data that we have available for existing home sales. So for New Jersey, they are part of the Northeast region in our data. We saw that for existing home sales in March in the Northeast, sales were down by 2% from February. So we see that from the year prior, it's actually identical. And looking at the median existing home sales price in the Northeast, it was up by 7.7% from the year prior, and this median price is $468,000 in March. Then from our chief economist, Lawrence Yun, I also want to share his current forecast that he releases on a quarterly basis. So right now he is forecasting that for existing home sales at the end of 2025, that they will be up by 6% from the year prior. For median existing home prices, they will also be up by 3%. And then right now he's forecasting that mortgage rates will be around 6.4% for 2025. And shifting a little bit, so looking at some of our survey data, and again, I mentioned our profile of home buyers and sellers. So this report has been produced by NAR since 1981. So, and especially in our latest report, we have many trend lines. We have many data points that we've been tracking historically. So we're able to see how lots of different factors have changed over time. Our latest data was released this past November. And again, from this report, we're able to create a couple of spin-off reports looking further at the data, looking by generations and seeing some of the differences in home buying and home selling between younger and older generations, which we just released in March. We also have our snapshot report again, so I'll be covering a little more of that later. But looking at the national report and just highlighting some of the bigger changes that we saw in this latest report. The first one was actually in the median ages of our recent home buyers. So we saw that in this latest report in 2024 that those median ages actually hit all-time highs. So looking at first-time home buyers, we see that the median ages actually went up to 38 in this latest report in 2024. For repeat home buyers, the typical age was 61 this year. So we're seeing that first-time home buyers are trending older. They're likely needing to save for longer periods of time. They're also approaching the market with, again, limited inventory. They're facing housing affordability issues. So we see that they might need to delay their home purchase for a longer period of time. And then following that, in our generational trends report, again, we look at the share of home buyers who are in each generation, and something that we saw this year was actually a shift in the top generation who was purchasing homes. So we had previously seen for several years that millennials were making up the largest share, but this year we see that baby boomers are actually making up the top share of home buyers this year at 42%. So we see that millennials dropped down from 38% last year to 29% this year. So again, since we had seen those ages trending older, we're expecting to see this kind of shift when we looked at the generational trends report. Then along with that, another all-time low that we saw in this latest report was with the first-time home buyers. So we saw that they dropped to a record low share this year at just 24%. So even looking historically, what we've been seeing over the years, we saw back in 2022 that we had a previous all-time low at just 26%. But again, we're seeing that those buyers are really facing those challenges, facing limited inventory, also difficulty saving for their down payment. Finding the right property is also one of the most difficult steps for first-time home buyers. We also see in the report, we have an entire chapter dedicated to the financial aspects of the home buying process. And we ask about some of the debts that might be delaying first-time home buyers from saving. And we see that especially first-time home buyers are still citing student loan debt, credit card debt, and high current rent payments as holding them back from saving towards their down payments. Then we also look at the household compositions of our recent home buyers in the report. So we see that this is another one of the trend lines that we're able to track. So in our latest report, and just specifically pulling out for first-time home buyers in this chart, we're seeing that when we look among all of our recent home buyers, the largest shares are still comprising of married couples. We see this also in our first-time home buyer share, just at a lower percentage than compared to all of our recent home buyers. So we saw in the latest report that 50% of first-time home buyers were married couples. We do see that for first-time home buyers, there is a larger share that are single women. So single women were making up 24% among first-time home buyers. We have seen that the share of unmarried couples in our first-time home buyers have actually dropped from last year's report a little bit. So they're making up about 12%. And then for single men, they're making up 11% for first-time home buyers. So even comparing back to 1985, when we began tracking that data, we see that the share of married couples especially is much lower. We see that single women are making up a larger share, as well as unmarried couples. Single men are trending just a little bit up from 1985. And then we also look at the median household incomes for our recent home buyers. So this is showing among all of our buyers, first time and repeat. So we've seen that, especially over these last 3 reports, we've seen some big increases in the median household income, especially between our 2022 and 2023 reports, since we report on the previous year of household income. We saw that, especially for our first-time home buyers, there was that large jump, and we've seen that the median household income has continued to increase even in our latest report. So we're seeing that those home buyers are really needing that extra income just to be able to get into home ownership, especially for our first-time home buyers. We saw again, that jump of nearly $26,000 for first-time home buyers 2 years ago. So we'll see if this trend continues, but I think it's really interesting to highlight just the increase that we're seeing. And then another trend that we've been tracking in our national data and also in some of our spinoff reports is the share of multi-generational home buyers. And again, these are homes that could house adult children, aging parents, adult siblings, lots of different situations. So we see that in our latest report, the share of multi-generational home buyers actually reached an all-time high since we began tracking this multi-generational share. So 17% of all recent buyers were multi-generational buyers this year. Some of the top reasons that buyers are choosing to purchase these types of homes were for the caretaking of aging parents, the cost savings that are involved in a multi-generational home. They might have children under the age of children over the age of 18 moving back into the home with them, or they might have children who have never left home. So they're looking for that extra room to be able to accommodate all of those extra people. We see that for first-time home buyers, especially who might be struggling to get into homeownership, this is a way that they can share some of the housing costs with some of their family members, and again, having multiple income earners that can afford that home together. Then looking at the share of home buyers reported having children under the age of 18 living with them, we saw that this actually dropped down to a record low of just 27% in our latest report. So compared all the way back to when we started tracking that data, the share was at 41% and reached a high of 58% the following year. So we're seeing that has been continuing to trend down. We see that as buyers may be pushing off home ownership until later times. We see that they also may be waiting to have children as well. Yeah, the locations that our recent home buyers are purchasing in. So this is again something that we saw trending differently in 2022. We did see some bigger shifts So in 2022, we did see that the share of recent buyers who were purchasing in the suburbs or subdivisions did drop to just 39%. And we did see that buyers purchasing in small towns and also rural areas increased. So in 2022, buyers might have had that flexibility for remote work, been able to look further out, and looking to some of those more affordable areas. But we have seen that in the latest two reports that those shares have been trending back down a little bit, still a little elevated from what we had previously seen, but we're still seeing that the largest percentage of buyers are purchasing in the suburbs or central cities. But we are seeing buyers purchasing in urban and central city areas is actually still trending upwards. So 16% were purchasing in urban or central city areas in this latest report. So even more than rural areas. Then looking at the types of homes that our recent buyers were purchasing, again, in 2022, we did see some shifts in the types of homes that buyers were purchasing. So we continue to see that detached single-family homes were the top choice for our recent home buyers. And in 2022, we did see some increases in the share of buyers purchasing mobile or manufactured homes, cabins and cottages. We saw that townhouses and row houses did decrease from making up the second largest share. But in more recent years, we're seeing that townhouses and row houses are again making up that second largest share, followed by apartments and duplexes, and with 2 to 4 units or 5 or more units as being some of the top housing choices. Then again, looking at the distance between the home that recent buyers purchased and their previous residence. Again, in 2022, we saw that actually increased to a historic high of buyers moving a median of 50 miles. So previously, we had seen that the median number of miles was between about 10 to 15 miles, what we had previously seen. And we see that it is still slightly up from what we had seen historically at 20 miles, but we do see that that has come down quite a bit in the latest two reports at just 20 miles. So we see that buyers might be needing to move closer into those central cities or suburban areas. They're not able to move as far anymore. We also see that again, since buyers are tending to be wealthier, especially in the latest two reports, that they might be able to afford purchasing closer to those areas. Then we also ask about the prior living arrangement for our recent buyers, and this chart in particular looks at the share of first-time home buyers and where they're where they're living immediately prior to their home purchase. So we see that in 2022, we did have a all-time high share of buyers, first-time buyers that were moving directly from living with friends, family, or relatives into home ownership at 27%. In this latest report, we have seen that come down a little bit. And in the latest report, 24% were moving from living with friends or family. So we see that for those buyers that are able to maybe live with their friends or family immediately prior, they're able to maybe pay down some of their debt, work on their credit scores, and save for their down payment. Continue to track the ways that buyers are purchasing their home, and we continue to see that buyers are looking to work with a real estate agent or a broker, especially for their home purchase. In this latest report, 88% of recent home buyers were purchasing through an agent or a broker. So we see that they're really looking to their real estate agent for help to find the right home, help with the negotiations, and especially for our first-time home buyers, they're looking to their agent for help throughout the home buying process, help with all of the paperwork that's involved. And when we look at this data by generations, we see that even our younger generations are still working with agents, and as well as first-time home buyers. And then I wanted to pull out something from our member profile. So this is another annual survey among our membership where we ask lots of different questions about their businesses, demographics, but one of the questions that we ask our membership is what they feel are the most important factors that might be limiting potential clients from completing a transaction. So they're given a longer list, but I just wanted to pull out the top 3 answers that we saw in last year's report. So we saw that they were reporting lack of inventory and also housing affordability as the top 2 choices that are top 2 factors that might be potentially limiting clients. So again, we're asking this question again this year, so we'll see if there are any changes there. But following along with that, we see that going back to our recent home buyers, we asked them about some of the difficult steps that they are facing during the home buying process. And we see that finding the right property was at the top of the list among all of our recent buyers, first time and repeat. For our first time home buyers, we see that they're also having trouble understanding the home buying process and all of the steps during the home buying process and still saving for a down payment. It's especially challenging for first time home buyers. So again, they're looking to their real estate agent to be their information source and really for that help to find the right property. Yeah, some of the down payment amounts, we look at the median down payment amounts for our recent home buyers and also first time and repeat buyers. So we saw that among all of our recent buyers, the median down payment amounts actually increased this year for all buyers. It was up to 18% that they're typically putting down. For first time home buyers, we have historically seen that it is at or below 10%. This year we saw that this was 9% for first time buyers, and then we see that it is higher for our repeat buyers who are typically putting down 23%. And again, since we've seen that buyers are trending wealthier, have a higher median household income, that they might be able to put more towards their down payment, especially in our latest 2 reports. And then we also look at the share of recent home buyers who are purchasing in all cash. So we saw that this actually reached an all-time high this year at 26%. And again, it's important to note that in our survey, we're looking at only primary residence buyers, so we're not including vacation or investors. So we're seeing that that is still trending at the highest. We can also assume that this is attributed to the higher share of repeat home buyers who are have that housing equity built up and are more able to put down cash towards their home. Then looking at the seller side, I'm looking at a similar chart. We ask our recent home sellers how they're selling their home, and we see that 90% of all recent home sellers were selling through an agent or broker. Looking at the for sale by owner share, we see that it's actually at an all-time low at just 6%. And we see that, again, home sellers are looking to work with an agent, help them maybe price their home competitively, help them market their home and find a qualified buyer. So we're seeing that on the buyer and seller side, that buyers and sellers who are working with an agent, if they're happy with their agent, they'll definitely recommend them again or work with them again when buying or selling. And then moving into some of our other data and our snapshot of recent home buying in America report. This looks at some of the home ownership trends within different race and ethnic groups, the obstacles that they're encountering during the home buying process, looking at further at some of the profile of home buyers and sellers data, looking at the demographics, motivations for purchasing, and again, some of the maybe challenges that they're facing in the home buying process. So I work on this report with one of my colleagues and just wanted to share some of the highlights from the report. We also have, we use the data again from the profile of home buyers and sellers, but also we use ACS data from the census to look at some of the home ownership rate data in this first section. So we also have a lot of state breakdowns. So if you're interested in seeing how New Jersey might compare to some other states, especially in the region. I would recommend taking a look at that. So I did pull out a couple of New Jersey specific data points, but yes, we have all of the states available. So looking first at the home ownership rates by race, and this is looking over the last decade from 2013 to 2023, which was the latest data available. We've seen that home ownership rates have actually increased among all race and ethnicities over the last decade. But when we look by race and ethnicities, we see that Hispanic Americans experienced the largest gains in home ownership rates over the last decade, increasing by about 6 percentage points. For Asian Americans, we also saw that their home ownership rate increased by 5.6%. For the white home ownership rate, looking nationally, increased by 3.6%. And then we see that the Black home ownership rate increased by 2.8% during the same time period. But looking at the Black home ownership rate, we do see that it still remains below 45%, so below that of any other group. And we do see that when we look by state, that there are, of course, some regional differences and different factors that might be affecting the home ownership rate within different states. So looking at New Jersey, I just pulled some of the numbers, but each of these different rows have their own dedicated chart in the report. So looking at the home ownership rate in New Jersey, we do see that it was highest for white Americans at 76% and Asian at 64%. We see that for Black New Jersey, the Black home ownership rate in New Jersey was 41%, and it was 40% for Hispanic Americans. And then looking at the variations in the home ownership rate, we see that those can be attributed to a couple different factors, some of them in the report that we expand on are demographic factors, affordability factors, and then also access to credit. And new in this year's report, my colleague also included some tips for members to be able to use this data better and share it with their clients that they might be working with, or so I would recommend taking a look at that as well. Looking at the next row, we're looking at the share of renters who can afford to purchase the typical home. And again, this will vary by state based on what the typical home price is in that state. But in New Jersey, we see that 40% of Asian Americans who are renters can afford to purchase the typical home, 21% for white Americans in New Jersey. And then we see it was lowest for Black and Hispanic Americans at 13 and 12% of those renters who can afford to purchase that. So we do see that looking in about 46 of the states across the US, Black renters are facing greater affordability challenges compared to white renters. We see that specifically in Washington, D.C., Nebraska, and Illinois, we saw the largest variations between white and Black renters. And then looking at the next row, this is the share of households who are between the ages of 25 and 40. So we see that this is more likely this age range to be the typical home buying age. So we see that where as more, especially minority communities are reaching that median home buying age, that there's the potential to increase the home ownership rate among those groups. So looking at New Jersey, we see that the highest share is actually among Hispanic households at 31%, 30.6% for Asian households, and then 24.5% for Black households and 20.6% for white households. And then looking at that last row, this is the mortgage denial rates. And again, this can vary by state. And we see that this is also based on some other factors that can influence even access to mortgage credit across different states. So we see that in New Jersey, mortgage denial rates were highest among Black households at 14%, and then 12% for Hispanic households, 9% for white, and then 8% for Asian. So again, my colleague has included some different tips and how realtors can use this information. So some of those tips, especially for looking at credit scores, looking at mortgage denial rates can be educating buyers about credit building strategies, working with lenders on pre-qualification assessments so that buyers are able to understand the financial options that they have. So yeah, I would definitely recommend taking a look at all of those. Then moving on to another one of the charts in our report. This looks at affordability challenges, and this is a little bit different than looking at our last chart. So this is actually among current homeowners. So this is the share of homeowners who are spending more than 30% of their income towards housing. And looking at New Jersey, we see that this was highest for Black homeowners at 36.3% and Hispanic homeowners at 35%, who are reporting that they're spending, again, more than 30% of their income towards housing. And that's compared to 27.5% of white homeowners and 23.9% of Asian homeowners in New Jersey. So again, we're seeing that affordability challenges are not only being faced by current by current renters, but also by existing homeowners. We see that for Black homeowners, they're typically experiencing larger cost burdens in 39 states. But again, we have all of this data available by different states, so I recommend taking a look further at some of this data. Then looking at another new chart that we included this year, we included some analysis to determine what the maximum price that first-time home buyers who are current renters can afford to purchase by race. So we see that across the US that this again is varying by race and by state on what they can likely purchase, the maximum price. So looking for white renters, we see that they can typically purchase a home that is $220,700. And again, this is the maximum price that they can purchase without exceeding their budget or going into being maybe cost burdened. So we see that in comparison to that, Black renters who are again facing some of the greatest affordability challenges can afford to purchase homes that are $163,080. We see that for Asian renters, they have the highest maximum price at $301,800. And then for Hispanic renters, they can typically they can afford to purchase homes at $214,100. So looking at New Jersey, we see that Black renters maximum price that they could afford was $198,770. It was highest among Asian renters at $419,840. And then we see for white renters, this was around $272,120, and then slightly lower for Hispanic renters at $220,060. So we're seeing this could be some useful information, especially for potential home buyers and looking at what they are most likely to be able to afford. Then let's see our next chart. So this is going into the race and ethnicity. So this is back to our profile of home buyers and sellers data. So looking at our survey data, we also track looking at the demographics of our recent home buyers. We see that buyers were most likely to be white and Caucasian at 83% in our latest report. We see that among all of our recent home buyers, Black and African American buyers were making up 7%, Hispanic and Latino buyers were making up 6%, and then Asian Pacific Islander buyers were making up 4%. So we're also able to look at this data historically. So historically, we've seen that white and Caucasian buyers were making up the largest shares. Then looking at the household composition. So I know we looked at this on a national level, but when we look by race and ethnicity, we're able to see some differences. So we see that looking at the share of single female home buyers, this is actually highest among Black and African American buyers at 33%. Looking at Asian Pacific Islander buyers, they have the largest share of married couples. And then we also see that for unmarried couples, this was highest among Black and African American and also Asian and Pacific Islander buyers. And then looking at some other demographics, looking at our snapshot report and the share of first-time home buyers, we see that the large share of first-time home buyers was among Black and African American buyers at 49%, followed by 43% for Asian and Pacific Islander buyers, and then 41% for Hispanic and Latino buyers. So last year we had seen that all of our minority home buyers, the share of first-time home buyers was more than 50%, but again, seeing that record low share of first-time home buyers among all of our buyers, we saw that, especially for Asian Pacific Islander buyers and Hispanic and Latino buyers, that those shares did drop down. For Black and African American buyers, though, we do see that that share only dropped by 2% from last year. So they're still, they're continuing to make up the largest share. And then looking at the share of multi-generational home buyers. So again, we looked at this data nationally and saw that that was 17%. But looking by race and ethnicity, we see that it's actually higher for our minority buyers compared to what we saw in the national data. We see it's highest among our Asian and Pacific Islander home buyers at 26%, and then it was 22% for Black and African American and Hispanic and Latino home buyers. So again, we're seeing some similar reasoning of by race and ethnicity, reasons for purchasing a multi-generational home, again, with the cost savings that's involved and caretaking of aging parents. Something new that we added this year is looking at the number of income earners in these multi-generational households. So we see that for all of our multi-generational households, that they were more likely to have more than 50% have two or more income earners. So again, having those extra incomes that can help afford that home together. Then looking at the down payment sources, so we look at this again in our national data, but we do see some differences looking by race and ethnicity. So in our national data, we see that using savings and also the proceeds from a previous sale are at the top of the list when we look by all home buyers. But when we look by race and ethnicity, we see that for Black and African American buyers, they were the most likely to use their 401k or pension towards their down payment, as well as something new that we added in this year. A new option was community and government down payment assistance programs. So we see that Black and African American buyers were the most likely to utilize that form of down payment assistance towards their down payment. Among Asian Pacific Islander buyers, we see that they were the most likely to get help from friends and family towards their down payment. So this is something else that we've looked at, especially among our younger home buyers, younger generations and first-time home buyers who are receiving gifts or loans from family and friends. So again, we see that Asian Pacific Islander buyers were the most likely to receive this type of help towards their down payment, as well as using stocks or bonds towards their down payment. And again, since we see that a larger share of minority home buyers are first-time home buyers, they're looking to some of these alternate down payment sources since they don't have that equity built up to use towards their down payment. And looking at the prior living arrangements, again, by first-time home buyers, and this time by race and ethnicity, we see that, again, living with friends or family immediately prior to the purchase is a way for them to pay down some of their debt, work on their credit scores, and have time to save towards their down payment. So we see by race and ethnicity that Black and African American buyers were the least likely to live with family or friends immediately prior to purchasing, compared to Asian Pacific Islander buyers and Hispanic and Latino home buyers who were more likely to be living with friends or family and either paying or not paying rent. Then we also look at the types of loans that our recent home buyers are using. And again, looking at the typical down payment amounts, but looking by race and ethnicity, we see that Black and African American home buyers were more likely to use FHA loans and also VA loans compared to compared to the other race and ethnicities. And looking at the median down payment amounts, we see that this was highest for Asian Pacific Islander buyers at 21%. As well as for white and Caucasian buyers at 19%, and again, lowest for Black and African American buyers at just 8%. And then I know we've talked about some of the challenges that our recent buyers are facing, and also some of the debts that might be holding them back from saving. And we look at the share of buyers who reported having student loan debt. So we saw that this was highest among Black and African American home buyers at 42%, and also Hispanic and Latino buyers at 23%. And in previous years, when we looked at this data, we had seen that Black and African American home buyers also had the largest student loan debt amount. This year, we actually saw that it was the same for Black and African American buyers and white and Caucasian buyers at a median of $30,000. It's followed closely by Asian Pacific Islander buyers who had a median student loan debt amount of $29,000, and then Hispanic and Latino buyers who had a median student loan debt amount of $25,000. So it's always interesting to take a look at, and then also looking at the different education levels and where some of the student loan debt might be coming from, especially looking at some of the graduate work, master's degrees, doctorate degrees, and higher education that buyers are, education levels that buyers have. And then I also wanted to share some of the metro level data that our team has available. So one of my colleagues puts this together using, again, census data from the American Community Survey. So she's put together a shortened version of who the typical home buyer is, looking by metro area. So I just wanted to share an example, supporting the New York, Newark, and Jersey City metro area. So we're able to compare to some of our national survey data and see what some of the differences might be. So in this metro area, buyers were typically 41 years old. They're more likely to purchase, again, single family homes. They're typically moving within the same state. And we see that they're most likely to be married couple households. So I included all of the links in this. And again, I'm happy to be able to share any of my slides if you want to take a look further. And then something else new that she has created is a metro level market statistics page. So you're able to find your metro area or any metro area that you're interested in taking a look at. So all of these different icons right in here, where you're able to click on them and generate different reports on the buyer metro area. So looking at housing affordability, economic conditions, home ownership demographics, and then also just overall demographics in the area. On the right side, I did just pull up some of the housing statistics that are available. So we release also median home prices on a quarterly basis. So all of the historical data is available in the reports, as well as home equity gains and also housing construction numbers. Again, all of the different reports that I mentioned can be found on NAR's research page. Again, you can find all of the different housing statistics that we're releasing on a monthly and quarterly basis, like our existing home sales, pending home sales, housing affordability index, and again, the metro home prices, as well as all the different reports that I mentioned on our reports page. Yeah, it's just another example of some of the housing statistics that we have available. Again, those home buyer and seller profiles by metro area. And yeah, just included the link for all of those. But thank you again for having me, and happy to answer any questions or point you in the right direction. Yes, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Brandi. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. for Brandi to answer. Otherwise, unless you do have questions, we can always send them to you afterwards, right, Brandi?
Yes, yep, and I'm happy for the slides to be shared. That's completely fine with me.
Okay, and you have links in your slides as well?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and a big thank you to Brandi for stepping in and sharing her valuable insights. We hope today's session brought you a clearer picture of the trends in shaping the real estate market today. And don't forget to check out for upcoming education events and webinars at ncjar.com. Again, thank you all for being here, and I appreciate your time. There was one more. Yes, a recording will be sent out of the webinar, as well as the slides as well, with the links that Brandi mentioned in her presentation. So we'll make that all available on ncjar.com, and we will also email it out to everyone who participated today. Okay, thank you again. Great to see you, Brandi. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.